What's up, guys? I'm BTC. Welcome back to The Respawn, a weekly series where I answer your questions. Before I get started, I want to let you know that for this weekend only, there is free shipping on all of the stuff you get from my Teespring store, so all the different t-shirts and other designs. You can go and check that out. There's a link down in the description. This is a great way to directly support the channel and also get yourself some cool stuff. Use the code SHIPFREE and you can get free shipping for this weekend only. Let's get started. First question, which hero do you think would have been banned the most if the feature had been implemented? So just to clarify, Jeff Kaplan has confirmed that hero bans will not be added anytime soon. We're getting something else new next week, but we don't know what it's going to be. But hero bans are not being added to the game anytime soon. Having said all that, what characters would have gotten banned? Well, if it was in the upper bracket or in the pro level, then it would have been meta picks. Whatever happens to be some of the strongest characters at the time would have gotten banned. Maybe it would be Baptiste or Orisa before she just got clobbered with all those nerfs, you know, stuff like that. In the lower bracket, characters would have been banned based on what players didn't want to play against as opposed to what was actually good. So you would see people banning out Mei and Reaper, Doomfist, and I even saw people saying that they would ban out Bastion, which makes absolutely no sense. Bastion's across-the-board pick rate is 0.23%. The chances that you see him in a match are so incredibly low that using a ban on him just makes no sense whatsoever. Now, I know a bunch of people always say, well, I see Bastion all the time. No, you don't. No, you don't, because the numbers don't lie. The pick rate doesn't lie. The reason why you think you see Bastion a lot is because it's actually such a rare occurrence that the instance of him appearing in your match actually sticks in your head. And it's one of those things where when it's something really common, it tends to be forgettable. But if something is unique and it only happens once in a while, it kind of sticks in your memory. And that's why a lot of people think that they see Bastion a lot, when in reality, his pick rate is less than 0.5%. Next up, is it possible to have both a 2-2-2 and a 3-2-1 role queue system, like a split competitive, for those who want to play whichever grouping? I actually thought about this. I don't think that Blizzard would ever do it because it would require them to balance the game in a weird way. Like, they would have to balance the game for two separate modes, right? You would have to balance for having just one tank and having two tanks. And that just gets all kinds of weird. It's kind of like the old system where you could pick whatever you want. You could have 3 tanks, 4 tanks, 5 tanks, whatever. And they had this kind of odd balancing system because they didn't know what you were going to do, right? They didn't know if you were going to have just 1 or 2 tanks on your team or if you were going to have 3 or 4. So it puts it into this weird way where I don't think they would ever do it. I think they're going to pick one and go with it. Right now it's 2-2-2. It looks like they're going to stay with that for a while. I mean, maybe at some point they decide to go with just, you know, a 3-2-1 type of system, or maybe even change the total number of characters on a team. But if they do that, I think they're going to keep it limited. They're not going to have this multiple variation type stuff. Next up, what will the meta be after PTR changes? The Orisa and the Sigma nerfs with the McCree buff, all that sort of stuff. Well, even before those PTR changes were announced, Orisa and Sigma had been nerfed quite a bit. And Dive was making a little bit of a comeback. Reinhardt was also coming back a little bit as well. I think with the PTR changes and Orisa and Sigma getting really weak, then there's so much more room for other stuff. And I think that one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to see just a full return to Dive comp, or we might end up seeing Reinhardt making probably the primary tank position again. And maybe you'll still have Orisa or Sigma, but I think Rein Zarya is going to be very powerful as well. Hanzo's still a very good character. Even with the nerfs that he's gotten recently, Hanzo is still very good. But McCree is now really good as well. So one of the things that with McCree's buff, it was meant to make him a little bit more resistant to dive characters, right? So if he gets dived on by a Genji or a Tracer or Winston or Diva or whatever, right? Having that extra 50 health is going to allow McCree to be much better of an anti-dive character. But the thing is, it also works really well with Reinhardt and Zarya because now he can be even more front line. And he's got that extra health to keep him alive, and you can use the stun and the fan the hammer in order to deal huge amounts of damage and stuff. So yes, it's going to be good anti-dive, but it's also going to be good frontline as well. And, this is one of those things. It's actually kind of reminds me a little bit of what they did with Brigitte, right? Like, Brig was originally meant to be a backline kind of anti-dive character, and that's not what happened. Instead, she just got put into the front line with Reinhardt and Zarya. So, I think that Orisa and Sigma are still going to find some play, but definitely going to be pushed aside in favor of Winston, D.Va, Reinhardt, Zarya. Next up, do you think you're ever going to revise or change your already completed hero concepts? I have given this a little consideration. I think it is much cooler to just kind of keep making new stuff, because I think people are more interested in seeing things that are new as opposed to just going back and changing some of the old ones. However, some of the characters that I made initially were based off of GOATS comp, right? That was like a major factor. In fact, the entire reason why I started making the hero concepts was because I wanted to make a character that could actually stop GOATS comp, and that's why I created Ares. Now, having looked at Ares again, I don't think he would really work all that well in the current game, and I do think that he would need a rework. So if I was to go back and make changes to any of the hero concepts, I think Ares would definitely be the one that I would change. Next up, when do you think Ekko will be released? I don't think that's going to happen until Overwatch 2. We know for a fact that Sojourn is not getting released until Overwatch 2. We also know that there's like 3, 4, or 5 other characters that are going to be released alongside of it. However, we are supposed to get at least one character, probably only one, from now until when Overwatch 2 gets released. And I don't know what character that's going to be. I think it's going to be something that we just haven't been expecting. I don't really think it's going to be Ekko, because the thing is, they're trying to build up Ekko as if she's this hugely important thing. And I don't think they really want to introduce that character into the game until they have all of the story to go along with it. And because of that, I don't think that they're going to release her until Overwatch 2. I think she would be released with that big batch of characters that gets put out at that time. But whoever we get from now until then, I don't know who it's going to be. I think it's just going to be someone that we haven't really ever heard of or thought of. I mean, maybe it could be someone like Junker Queen or something, but I don't know. I think, though, that we're probably going to get a new hero maybe in March timeframe, right? I would say probably March timeframe, somewhere around there. Next up, could an ability that gives tanks, DPS, or healers a different buff work? So you throw it on a tank, they get a little extra health. You throw it on a DPS, they get extra damage. You throw it on a support, they get a little extra movement speed. Something like that. I mean, I don't see anything particularly super bad about it, but I don't think it's a good ability either, because the more that you give an ability, the weaker it needs to be, which is actually kind of funny. It's a nice comparison to Sigma. Sigma can do all kinds of different things, and because of that, all of it needs to be nerfed into the ground and weakened again and again and again. So if you have a single ability that can do just one thing, then you can make that one thing pretty good. But if it has to do a whole bunch of things, then it needs to get weaker. And I think it would be a waste of an ability if you had something that just wasn't really good, right? Like, if it's not a good ability, then why have it? Next up, would it be possible if ultimate charge is conserved when switching heroes but change depending on cost? I've seen this mentioned a couple of times. I don't think it would really work. There's a bunch of reasons. Each ultimate cost is different, right? You have some that are pretty low, down in 13, 1400, 1500, and then you have others that are over 2000. So in the question, it would be changed depending on cost, which means you can't really just do a flat kind of percentage like, oh, you have 50% of this, so you get 50% of this other character. That wouldn't work, particularly if you manage to get 100%, right? So if you got, 100% of Moira's ult, and then you switch to Zenyatta, do you now have Zenyatta's ultimate? That would be unbelievably unbalanced if you could just switch like that. Even if you were to change it based on the cost, and let's say, you started with Moira and then you switch to Zen and you end up with like 60 or 70%, that's still, that's still a lot. And I just don't really see how it could work. I don't know. I'm not really sure that there's a way you could get this to work where you conserve the ultimate, because there's just so many factors. I mean, different characters can build it faster. Even if it costs more, some characters can still build faster than others. I don't know. I think it would be an extremely complicated system, and I'm not really sure it could work. Next up, what are your thoughts about a shrinking ability? Specifically, a support that can choose to shrink a teammate for a short duration so that they can sneak into the enemy backline. Alright, so I've seen the shrinking ability concept or growing ability on some other hero concepts. I've considered using it on one of my characters that I've been making as well. I haven't fully designed that character yet, though. What you're talking about, where you can shrink a teammate, I don't think that would be a good idea. Yes, it would definitely reduce the size of their hitbox, which would be incredibly strong because it would make them smaller and harder to hit. But imagine you use it on a tank, right? Like, then their whole job is to absorb damage. And if they're smaller and, they're not blocking the way anymore, specifically, if it was a Roadhog or something like that, they're like, the only way that Roadhog can actually stop damage is by literally standing in the way. And if you make him smaller, then he can't do that as well. Also, there are some other problems with it. If you shrink the character, does this reduce the size of their jump, right? The height of their jump, so now they can't get on top of certain objects? Or also, whenever they're attacking something, it's going to move their viewpoint down. Like, if you're playing a character like Reinhardt or any of the other tall characters, your camera viewpoint is much higher, and if you switch to Torbjorn, then your camera viewpoint is much lower. So imagine just having that camera shift happen when you're not expecting it. Suddenly your teammate hits you with this shrinking ability. It would be really frustrating because you're aiming at something and suddenly your whole camera just kind of moves down a bit. Now, if you wanted to use this ability on yourself, then I think it would be a good idea because you could certainly control when it happens. So you know that the camera shift is going to happen. You know that you might not be able to jump on top of this object. But having a shrinking character could have some benefits. Again, the hitbox is smaller. Maybe you could make them move a little bit faster or something like that. But you could also use it as a debuff on an enemy player. Yes, it would shrink the size of their hitbox, making them harder to hit, but you could also add some extra stuff to it as well. Like, maybe they don't have as much health, maybe their total health gets cut by a certain amount, or maybe they have less damage resistance, or maybe they do less damage total, like their damage output gets reduced. There's a whole bunch of different things that you could do, and it could work as either a self buff or as an enemy debuff, but I don't think putting it on one of your teammates is a good idea. Next question. Yes, this is a real question that got asked, and given all of the circumstances going on right now, I felt it was kind of important to include it. With all the problems on YouTube, what is the best way to support channels? Watching ads, a certain amount of the video, or something else? If you want to directly support a channel, whether it's mine or anyone else's, then the best way, if you're going to do it financially, then you can either support them on Patreon or whatever other stuff is available. You can, for my channel, you can hit the little join button next to subscribe, and you can actually become a member on YouTube, and that money goes directly to me. You can buy merchandise like t-shirts and stuff. You can use that free shipping code that I mentioned earlier to get that stuff this weekend. Now, if you want to support a channel for free, if you don't want to spend money but you still want to support them, then the best ways to do it is to like the video and to share it. Not even kidding. You have no idea how much of an impact that stuff can have, because YouTube massively favors the big companies and those channels, and the algorithm tries to put everybody over to them. So if you guys can like and share a video enough, then it forces the algorithm to start directing people towards smaller channel videos like mine or whoever else. So like and share the videos. Those are so massively important. You can do it. It does a lot, and it's free, right? But, if you want to get something in return, you can buy a shirt or those other things. That's going to be all the questions for this week. Thank you to everyone who submitted one. I already posted a new question card on the community tab of my YouTube channel. You can go there right now and leave a question for next week. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell to get notified. You can get some cool gear, join my Discord server, or follow me on social media with the links down in the description below. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters, and remember, always blame the controller because it's never your fault.